Chapter 261, Lin Feng, want to die. The annual meeting of the Lin clan was happening like every year at the end of the year. At that moment, Lin Badao's son, Lin Hong was punching another junior of the Lin clan, his fist was surrounded by a powerful ice. Immediately after, the entire crowd heard a loud shout from Lin Hong's opponent. Wow, how strong. Like father, like son. Lin Hong is extremely powerful. Indeed, it has been a series of successes since Lin Hai and his piece of trash son left the clan. Nowadays, the head of our clan has 2 children and they are both geniuses. Lin Qian is famous for being a genius, but Lin Hong is also a talented genius, he is amazing. Except for Lin Qian, nobody else in the Lin clan can rival him. They are both almost as powerful as the elders of the clan, said an elder while smiling. His clear and loud voice spread through the entire arena. Everybody could hear him very clearly. Amongst those who heard him was Lin Feng, who was calmly walking through the Lin clan territory. Lin Feng hadn't thought that people would still be criticizing him and his father to satisfy Lin Badao. He couldn't help but smile. He raised his head, looked at the person in the distance and said in a mocking tone, "Oh, is that so?" His voice wasn't loud at all, but everybody heard him. People were stupefied. They turned around and immediately, they saw a silhouette, a young man. He looked surprisingly familiar. That familiar person was called a piece of trash by everyone, but during the annual meeting of the previous year, he had displayed an incredible power. After that, he had also shown an amazing display at the competition of Yangzhou City. Everybody had seen how strong he was, but he had been expelled of the Lin clan. At the time, the clan had decided to choose Lin Qian instead of Lin Feng. Everybody thus thought that Lin Qian was much stronger than Lin Feng and had a better talent to develop in the future. They thought that the clan would be able to rise alongside her and, someday, she would become the clan head. It's him. It's Lin Feng. Lin Feng came back. He came back to the Lin clan. Many people were astonished when they saw Lin Feng. He looked different, he seemed more handsome and delicate. That handsome young man also looked more mature than before. He looked very calm, yet his facial expression was extremely sharp and cold. Lin Feng. Lin Badao narrowed his eyes. That young man, whom he had expelled from the clan, surprisingly dared to return. A mocking smile appeared on Lin Badao's face. Of all the places where he could go, he returned to the Lin clan, he was courting death. On the stage, Lin Qian wasn't reacting the same way as her father. She started shaking violently. It was Lin Feng, unbelievable. She had asked herself if the young man, who was terrifying the people in the imperial city, was going to come back to the Lin clan. She was not feeling safe and had hoped he would not return. Lin Feng had come back, and it was possible that he had come back to reclaim his and his father's lost honor. "You dared to come back," said the 9th elder when he saw Lin Feng. He had an ice-cold and evil smile on the corner of his mouth. He then said, "Lin Feng, your father rebelled against the respectable elder and killed members of the clan. He has committed many crimes. Besides, you are the same and don't respect the elders, you are arrogant and rude. You have also been expelled from the Lin clan. Besides, last year, you attempted to assassinate Lin Feng, but luckily she managed to escape alive. Today, you dared to return to Yangzhou City and even come back to the Lin clan? Are you done talking crap?" said Lin Feng to the 9th elder. He found him to be ridiculous. He had come back and they were still creating more crimes to accuse him. He didn't feel like listening to them anymore. Talking crap, the 9th elder narrowed his eyes. He was staring at Lin Feng with an ice-cold glare. "You called me a piece of trash a moment ago. Today is the annual meeting of the Lin clan. Would you dare to let your son come here and fight me?" said Lin Feng. The 9th elder's son was about the same age as Lin Feng. When he heard Lin Feng, he remained silent. His eyes looked even colder. "How come you're no longer talking? Your son is a piece of trash and doesn't dare fight, right?" "He is even worse than a piece of trash," said Lin Feng mockingly. He then started walking slowly towards the fighting stage. After a short moment, he appeared in front of the entire crowd and slowly walked towards the fighting stage. Many juniors of the Lin clan, when they saw Lin Feng pass by, opened the way for him, letting him pass towards the fighting stage. After that, Lin Feng moved onto the fighting stage and looked around at the crowd surrounding the stage. "How come you aren't saying anything?" said Lin Feng to the 9th elder again. Lin Badao smiled coldly and said, "Lin Feng, we had forgotten that you were also a junior of the Lin clan. Last time, we didn't kill you, we let you off, and surprisingly, instead of being thankful for showing you mercy, you dared come back to the Lin clan. Didn't kill me? Mercy?" Lin Feng was a bit surprised. When had Lin Badao showed him this mercy? When had he let him off? "When I arrived, I heard people licking Lin Badao's boots. He is really shameless. He even surrounds himself with the same type of shameless people." "How audacious," shouted the 9th elder extremely loudly. He also released a cold chi. "Maybe I am audacious. A moment ago, you were talking about how great and majestic Lin Qian and Lin Hong were. They are true geniuses, right?" "Of course, they are the geniuses of our clan," replied the 9th elder. "Well, and me, I am a piece of trash, right?" "So you already know your place," said the 9th elder mockingly. "Since that is clearly the case, the piece of trash, I am willing to exchange pointers with the geniuses of the Lin clan, Lin Hong, Lin Qian, and any others who wish to come onto the stage. If I lose, then kill me," said Lin Feng in a loud voice. If he lost, he would die. How arrogant, how presumptuous, how majestic. The people of the Lin clan remained silent. Apart from Lin Qian and Lin Hong, who would be willing to battle against Lin Feng? 1 year before, Lin Feng was already extremely powerful. How strong would he be after a year? How come nobody is speaking? I, Lin Feng, want to die, said Lin Feng while laughing and staring at the crowd. He wanted to die. How insane did that sound? Everybody was stupefied, but as before, nobody dared reply. All the juniors of the clan were astonished and they were all looking at Lin Qian and Lin Hong. Only they could win against Lin Feng. But, they knew about Lin Feng's exploits in the Imperial City. Fighting against Lin Feng would be courting death. I, Lin Feng, beg of you to come and kill me, but nobody is coming. What a load of crap. You all dare to speak such insane words and pretend that you are better than me. You talk about geniuses. I admire your shamelessness. I didn't know that your shamelessness had reached unfathomable heights. Lin Feng really was making fun of the Lin clan and it was becoming more and more obvious. The people of the clan felt their cheeks burning. Lin Feng had been expelled from the clan, but at that moment, he was on the fighting stage of the Lin clan and asking people to go kill him, and surprisingly, nobody dared to fight against him, including the young genius who was the hope of the clan, Lin Qian. You impudent brat, furiously shouted the ninth elder. He had just finished talking and Lin Feng was already shouting and mocking the ninth elder. Didn't you, a moment ago, say that I was a piece of trash and that they are geniuses, but now, where are they? I am here and I want to die, but they don't dare to fight. If you are willing to, you can also come down. I really want to die. How insane. How shocking. Lin Feng was inviting the ninth elder to come onto the fighting stage to kill him as well. He really had a death wish. The ninth elder narrowed his eyes and looked at Lin Qian and Lin Hong. He then immediately smiled coldly and said, Lin Feng, Lin Qian and Lin Hong are geniuses of the Lin clan. It would be a humiliation for them to fight against you, but since you want to die, I should help you. When he finished talking, the ninth elder jumped onto the fighting stage, immediately landing in front of Lin Feng. What an impressive agility technique, how beautiful. Lin Feng surprisingly challenged the ninth elder to a battle. How insane, he really wants to die. The ninth elder has broken through to the 5th Ling Qi layer. He definitely deserves his reputation as a strong cultivator. He is extremely powerful. Lin Feng is already dead. The crowd had various thoughts about the ninth elder when they saw him jump onto the fighting stage. At the same time, an insane quantity of ice chi concentrated itself on his fist and suddenly bombarded the atmosphere, moving straight towards Lin Feng. It seemed like Lin Feng was going to freeze on the spot. Lin Feng was calmly standing there, looking at the ninth elder, who had an evil smile on his face. Die, shouted the ninth elder, but at that moment, Lin Feng waved his hand and cut the atmosphere. A bright and resplendent sword chi flashed in the air. Immediately after, the ninth elder didn't even have the time to give a horrible shriek before his blood filled the air. He just pitifully groaned and collapsed. His facial expression looked calm, his body was lifeless. The crowd was astonished and their hearts were violently pounding. They were shocked, dumbstruck. Had the ninth elder died? The ninth elder had been killed by Lin Feng with a single blow? The crowd was dumbstruck and terrified. They only saw Lin Feng look at the corpse on the ground and say with an indifferent tone, a piece of trash. Lin Feng walked forwards again. He looked at the crowd with an insane smile on his face. I, Lin Feng, want to die. Chapter 262, Kill Lin Feng. I, Lin Feng, want to die. His furious shout was echoing throughout people's hearts like the waves of a tsunami. The words I want to die were so arrogant. He had been expelled from the clan and at this moment, he was looking down on everyone. The one everyone used to call a piece of trash was at this moment, looking down on the clan and mocking them as if they meant nothing. I, Lin Feng, the piece of trash who was expelled from the clan. Lin Feng kept joking. In the past, during the competition of Yangzhou City, he had also said things that sounded insane at the time, but his power shocked everyone. Back then, he was already much stronger than Lin Qian. Lin Qian could not rival him. Besides, these days, even though Lin Qian had broken through to the 4th Ling Qi layer, Lin Feng had just killed the 9th elder who was at the 5th Ling Qi layer with a single attack. How strong was he really? Could Lin Qian rival such a monster? Lin Feng was the most outstanding disciple of the Lin clan, but such a genius had been expelled. Why is nobody speaking? Said Lin Feng. The crowd only stared at him. They all remained absolutely silent. Lin Feng couldn't help but keep mocking them. Before I arrived, were you not all flattering Lin Qian and Lin Badao? Were you not all just criticizing my father and me to gain his good graces? Now, I am standing before you, but each and every single person here has suddenly become deaf and mute. If I am a piece of trash, you are a bunch of shameless, low-life, worthless cultivators. Lin Feng's voice was piercing through the silent atmosphere. Everyone's faces were turning bright red. They were looking at Lin Feng with killing intent in their eyes. Your father and you are the same, traitors, who don't respect the elders of the clan. You are both filthy animals. At that moment, a furious voice interrupted. It came from Lin Feng's third uncle, Lin Haoran. When he saw Lin Feng, he remembered his son, who had been crippled by Lin Feng and became filled with jealousy, but this jealousy quickly turned into hatred. Lin Feng was stupefied. A sharp expression filled his eyes and he glared at Lin Haoran. A traitor, his father, and he were animals? Incredibly, it is possible to reach such a high level of shamelessness, said Lin Feng coldly and then added, back in the past, my father and I never offended you, but because you wanted his position as head of the clan, you humiliated me and threatened my father. You wanted to replace him as the clan head using despicable methods. Have you ever thought about the fact that he was your brother? After that, because you created an opportunity to reach your goal, the respectable elder attacked and injured my father. Then you expelled us from the Lin clan. You are really shameless. Besides, during the annual competition of Yangzhou City, I started to reveal outstanding talent, but you were afraid of my talent, which is why you tried to kill me. Did you think about our blood relations at that time? Now, you are calling me a traitor? Why is that? You attack your own brother, the head of your clan, and you dare to call other people traitors. You chose to replace my father with someone else? I, Lin Feng, have nothing to do with scum like you. There is only humiliation to gain from associating with you. I, Lin Feng, have returned. Lin Haoran, if you criticize my father again, I will kill you. When Lin Feng said those words, an immense quantity of sword chi whistled through the atmosphere. Lin Feng looked like a powerful sword at that moment. He was infinitely sharp, dazzling, brutal, and aggressive. Lin Feng surprisingly dared to threaten his third uncle, threatening to kill him. That was a huge humiliation for Lin Haoran, to be threatened by Lin Feng in public like that. He coldly said, "Your father is an animal, and the son of an animal is an animal, so you are both filthy animals." How could Lin Haoran be intimidated by a little boy to the extent that he wouldn't dare to speak? Boom! Lin Haoran's words reached Lin Feng's ears. An invisible pressure suddenly fell onto everyone's shoulders. Lin Feng was spinning around and seemed to have transformed into a sword, an extremely sharp one. An incredible sword energy overwhelmed the entire atmosphere. The crowd was gasping in astonishment. How powerful! It seemed like they had underestimated Lin Feng. He seemed to be much stronger than all of them. The invisible sword energy was surrounding the entire crowd. They were all fixedly staring at Lin Feng. He had become so monstrously strong. Lin Haoran's heart was pounding. Nobody knew that the energy which was now oppressing his body was painfully sharp. He was controlling himself, but his facial expression was changing drastically, his heart was pounding. Panic-stricken, he was fixedly staring at Lin Feng. How strong? That sword chi is way too strong. Lin Haoran thought. How strong had Lin Feng become? Lin Haoran was absolutely terrified and regretted what he just said to Lin Feng. Die, shouted Lin Feng furiously. The invisible sword energy turned into a sharp sword. Lin Feng jumped into the air. It seemed like his entire body transformed into a sword, an extremely sharp and devastating sword. The crowd was dumbstruck, to the extent that they forgot to try to stop Lin Feng. Even if they did see him coming, they couldn't afford to take the risk of getting in his way. An incredibly brilliant and resplendent light filled the atmosphere. There was no sword, only the light glow given from sword energy. Lin Haoran felt hopeless and his facial expression gradually dropped and blood started to pour from a hole that had been pierced between his eyebrows. One strike and his life had ended. As before, only one strike. Lin Feng moved back to his original position on the stage. There was nothing in his hand, but sword chi was still present in the atmosphere. That incredibly daring young man confused everyone in the crowd. Where was his sword? He was such a genius, yet he had been expelled from the clan. At that moment, he had come back to regain his dignity. You killed your third uncle, said Lin Badao while looking at the corpse. He was looking at Lin Feng in an ice-cold way with killing intent in his eyes. Third uncle, said Lin Feng while laughing and then added, Lin Badao, you and Lin Haoran, have you ever acted like my uncles? Lin Badao was stupefied. He and Lin Haoran had indeed plotted against Lin Feng's father. Lin Feng had never been like a nephew for them. You have never regarded me as your nephew. You always regarded me as a piece of trash and humiliated me. You expelled me from the clan and even tried to kill me. At that moment, you never thought that you were my uncle, right? Now that I have killed him, you just now remember that he was my uncle? Lin Badao, don't you think that you are being ridiculous? Lin Feng said mockingly and continued, besides, now I am no longer a member of the Lin clan. If anyone dares to insult my father, I will kill them. Once again, Lin Feng was openly threatening everyone. His words were extremely harsh. At that moment, Lin Feng's words were like sharp swords. Amongst the people of the Lin clan, many were regretting that Lin Feng had been expelled from the clan. If he had been in the Lin clan, he would have been much more prestigious than Lin Qian. However, everybody remained silent. The atmosphere was horrifyingly silent. Lin Feng's expression looked like he wanted to burst into laughter. He said, now, the cowardly atmosphere is contagious in the Lin clan. There is only a bunch of little people left who don't know how to do anything but unceasingly flatter Lin Badao, the clan head. None of you has any strength of character and the clan has no future. This is ridiculous and sad. Lin Badao, this is the result created from you becoming the clan head. When Lin Feng finished talking, everybody was astonished. They realized that what Lin Feng said was the truth. At that moment, he was standing on the fighting stage and nobody could rival him. Everyone remained silent. If Lin Hai had been there, he would have been a source of inspiration, even though he did not show himself often. He didn't resemble Lin Badao. The people of the Lin clan, when they heard Lin Feng's making fun of them, all felt humiliated. Lin Badao, in the past, you plotted against my father and me to make us leave the clan. Now, I am back to reclaim our dignity and honor on the fighting stage. Lin Badao, can you act like a real man for once in your cowardly life and join me on the fighting stage? Lin Feng was challenging Lin Badao. Lin Badao looked uncertain. Lin Feng, who had been expelled by him, surprisingly challenged him. How strong was he? The crowd looked at Lin Badao. Lin Badao slowly stood up, but suddenly heard Lin Qian shout, "Father, don't fight against him." The crowd was stupefied and looked at Lin Qian. They only saw Lin Qian was unceasingly shaking her head and stopping her father. Lin Qian wanted to prevent her father from fighting against Lin Feng? When Lin Feng arrived, he challenged Lin Qian. Lin Qian had not even considered fighting against Lin Feng. Could it be that she knew his real strength? Did Lin Qian know where Lin Feng had been this whole time? Did she also know his real strength? "Traitor!" shouted a voice which filled the atmosphere. A silhouette was rushing through the air. He looked majestic. Many people were delighted to see the silhouette appear. It was the respectable elder, Lin Rui. In the past, he injured Lin Hai and also contributed to Lin Feng and Lin Hai's expulsion from the clan. Now, he was showing himself again. Lin Feng was definitely going to die. Respectable elder, all the members of the Lin clan were slightly bowing in front of Lin Rui, who was descending from the sky. His voice was ice cold and he said, "The son of the traitor has come back. Everybody, hurry up and kill him. You have to kill any traitors that enter our territory." Everyone? They had to capture him together? The crowd was stupefied. Lin Baidao, however, immediately nodded and said, "Members of the Lin clan, listen to the order, kill Lin Feng." When Lin Baidao finished talking, many people started to reluctantly walk towards the fighting stage. Lin Feng glanced at the crowd and a demonic smile appeared on his face. Together? Everyone against him? So they wanted an unfair fight, right? At the Nalan clan, Lin Feng had not personally fought. Using his authority, he had controlled everything with only his words. However, he had gone to the Lin clan for a different reason. He wanted to regain his honor and dignity. This time, he wanted to regain his honor on the fighting stage, not using his status and authority. But at the moment, the Lin clan wanted to attack him, the whole clan against him? Lin Feng laughed, gazed towards the sky and shouted order. Chapter 263, Officer. What's going on? What's happening? The members of the Lin clan were stupefied. Suddenly they heard a rumbling noise fill the atmosphere, but it was coming from every direction. It seemed like there was an earthquake and the ground was trembling. Boom! 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 The incredibly loud booms filled the atmosphere. It seemed like the buildings were about to collapse from the vibrations. Someone was coming to attack the Lin clan. They were destroying the barricades in their district. The crowd was shaking. The sounds were moving closer with each second. The noises spread throughout the atmosphere along with the thumping of everyone's heartbeat. It sounded as if there was a stampede of thousands upon thousands of cavalry charging at full speed, and were approaching from the four corners of the Lin clan district. They immediately forced entry into the Lin clan's district and galloped towards the crowd. Respectable elder. The crowd looked around and looked at the majestic respectable elder. They were panicking. It seemed like an extremely heavy chi had fallen from the sky and landed on them. It was unceasing and getting nearer and nearer to the crowd. The crowd was in pain as the chi filling the atmosphere was so sharp that it could cut. They felt like they were suffocating under the intense pressure. The respectable elder, Lin Rui, was frowning. He could also feel the extremely strong chi moving towards them. Besides, he could tell that armored horses were charging towards them from all directions. How come so much cavalry were coming to the Lin clan? "Look over there," shouted someone in the crowd. The crowd looked at the north of the area. Immediately after, red silhouettes appeared in the distance. Red horses, red armor, how domineering and imposing. That was an entire army of Qi Xie cavalry. They were charging towards them, the people's hearts were racing. The people of the Lin clan were dumbstruck. How was that possible? Why would an extremely strong army of armored cavalry come to the Lin clan? "There are some over there as well," shouted the terrified crowd. There was an army to the south as well. And over there. The Qi Xie cavalry were coming from the east, from the west, from everywhere. Everybody was surrounded by Qi Xie troops. It was an endless sea of red. It was a magnificent and terrifying sight. The people's heart were violently shaking. They were all suffering in silence. There was only the sound of the cavalry approaching. The crowd was just blankly staring at that whole scene. There were even some short moments when they had blackouts from the panic. That was an army, an extremely strong army. That army seemed to be endless as if there were millions of them. Besides, all of them had piercingly strong gazes and released brutally strong chi. That army must be painted red from the blood of their enemies. When the crowd sensed the brutally strong chi, their hearts started beating even faster. A blood-red army had appeared at Lin clan during their annual meeting and was encircling them. If the army wanted to annihilate the Lin clan, it would be as easy as wiping away dust. Who are they? Why has such a powerful army come to the Lin clan? Everybody was absolutely astonished. None of them thought that there could be a relation between the extremely strong army and the young man standing on the fighting stage. They didn't dare to think about such a terrifying thought, not even in their worst nightmares. Even though Lin Feng had just shouted order, they had already removed that from their minds. They had other things to worry about and the crowd was completely focused on the powerful army. That strong and powerful army had encircled them. There were some horses moving out from the crowd, they were probably high-ranking personnel in the army. The members of the Lin clan were all moving aside, not daring to obstruct their path. They were surrounding the fighting stage, but they all gathered, facing Lin Feng. Lin Feng raised his hands and the high-ranking personnel moved towards Lin Feng. That fool, is he tired of living? The crowd was cursing at Lin Feng in their hearts. He was surprisingly still standing on the stage. They just hoped that he wouldn't get involved. At that moment, the cavalry stopped at the edge of the fighting stage and glanced at the crowd. Immediately, everybody's heart started pounding. These people's facial expressions were so sharp and cold. They were all extremely strong cultivators. The weakest in the army were at the same level as an elder of the Lin clan. The ones in charge were even stronger. Lin Rui was also extremely strong. Amongst the army, there were at least 3 people who were of similar power or slightly weaker than him. Besides, if there was a battle, there was one person in the army that might be able to kill Lin Rui alone. The Qi Xie troops were releasing their powerful Qi. These people were born from battles and frequently bathed in the blood of their enemies, they were fighting gods, they were much stronger than an ordinary army. They had incredible battle experience and they were a step above normal cultivators. You have come to my Lin clan today, however I don't know what we can do for you, but I will do my best to help you in any way possible. Lin Rui looked at the army and spoke with a very respectful tone. He had adopted the strategy of diplomacy. If he made them angry, they could annihilate the entire clan. It was better for him to stay humble. At that moment, he was even bowing in an extremely respectful way. He was bowing the same way the people of the Lin clan had bowed to him previously. He seemed to be a different person when dealing with such a powerful army. However, the soldiers didn't pay attention to him, they didn't even spare him a glance. Immediately after, they jumped down from their horses, placed their hands on their chests and bowed while shouting in unison, "Officer! Officer?" Where was the officer? The crowd was stupefied. They looked around them like crazy and were looking for someone who looked like an officer of these powerful troops. Could it be that someone even stronger was about to arrive? Some small sounds spread in the air. There were tens of thousands of soldiers here. Besides, what amazed the crowd was that some of them were kneeling on the ground. "Officer!" At that moment, a thunderous roar came from thousands of people shouting at the same time and the ground shook from the entire army kneeling down. The entire army was all kneeling down and saluting. That was an amazing vision. In Shuiyu, people only had to kneel down only in front of the imperial family to pay respect. In front of others, a simple bow was sufficient. But the troops were kneeling down as a sign of devotion and respect for their officer. They had dedicated their lives to their officer, it was their way of honoring their officer. At that moment, the entire army was kneeling down facing the same direction, the fighting stage. The tens of thousands of Qi Xie soldiers were kneeling and their brains were all thinking at incredible speeds, but their hearts were moving much faster than their minds. Surprisingly, these soldiers were saluting their officer by kneeling down. The crowd was looking around yet they couldn't see anyone who looked like a battle-hardened officer. Finally, they looked in the direction that the soldiers were facing, they were all facing the fighting stage. Everybody was blinking as if they couldn't believe their eyes. Impossible. Absolutely impossible, the crowd was finally looking at the young man standing on the fighting stage. Even though they had already guessed, nobody dared accept the truth, they didn't want to. A gentle breeze was blowing which made Lin Feng's robe start to flutter. He then slightly raised his hand and said, "Everybody, stand." "Roger, officer," said all the soldiers in unison and they all moved to their feet in perfect synchronization. The people in the crowd felt like a dagger had just been plunged into their chest, they were shaking as if they were about to collapse. Lin Feng, it was Lin Feng, surprisingly, it was actually Lin Feng. The crowd was dumbstruck. They couldn't believe their eyes. The one whom all the troops were kneeling down and saluting was surprisingly the only person standing on the fighting stage, Lin Feng. That was the young man whom they used to call a piece of trash and had expelled from the Lin clan. The crowd couldn't believe what was happening. Lin Rui groaned, his blood was boiling, he almost coughed a mouthful of blood. He was fixedly staring at Lin Feng. "Officer! How is such a thing possible?" thought Lin Rui astonished. Lin Badao also couldn't believe it. The officer surprisingly was Lin Feng. They suddenly realized what was happening and what was about to happen. Lin Feng had come to the Lin clan to regain his honor, but he did not come alone. Cough cough. Lin Badao was coughing up blood. He turned deathly pale. They were finished, this would be the end. Chapter 264, Regret and Resentment. "Together, come onto the fighting stage and kill me, what are you waiting for?" Lin Feng was looking at the crowd while sounding cold and detached. The people of the Lin clan were shaking. Would they dare? Such a strong army just required a few seconds to annihilate the Lin clan and slaughter all of its members. Would they still dare to attack Lin Feng together? "Respectable elder, you are very majestic, originally, you gave the order for them to attack me in a group, now you are standing there and doing nothing at all, what is that supposed to mean?" Lin Feng was smiling mockingly. The respectable elder's face became rigid. His lips were shaking but the words wouldn't come out. At that moment, everyone's lives were in Lin Feng's hands. "Respectable elder, you are very strong. You attacked my father from behind and injured him in a single strike. You also expelled my father and I from the Lin clan, how domineering, how imposing. Now, I will give you an opportunity to show your invincible power to everybody again." When Lin Feng saw that Lin Rui was remaining silent, he continued talking. Back in the past, his father had displayed amazing power and strength, nobody dared fight him to the extent that even the respectable elder Lin Rui had to personally appear to injure Lin Hai. After that, he had expelled them from the clan. How could Lin Feng forget Lin Rui? You expelled my father and me from the clan. When the crowd heard those words, they all looked puzzled. Indeed, the officer, who was controlling such a terrifying army, belonged to their clan, but he had been expelled. Lin Feng, while relying on his own strength, had become incredibly strong. He had easily killed the Ninth Elder and Lin Haoran. Besides, he had also become the officer of the Qi Xia army. He was respected by thousands upon thousands of people. Even without mentioning the tiny little Lin clan, at that moment, Lin Feng could even annihilate the entire city of Yangzhou. But such an amazing genius had been expelled from the Lin clan. He was forced to leave. What sort of joke was that? However, that was the bitter reality, and it certainly saddened many of the clan members. Such geniuses appeared once every 1,000 years. But, they expelled him and caused him to feel hatred towards the clan. If Lin Feng was in the clan, how prestigious would our clan be? Many people were trying to imagine what would have happened if Lin Feng hadn't been expelled from the Lin clan. With Lin Feng's current power, he had managed to obtain Yangzhou City, so if Lin Feng was still in their clan, it would mean that the entire city of Yangzhou would have belonged to the Lin clan. Their dream was to overtake the Naolan clan as the top clan in the city, but the task of making that dream come true had been assigned to Lin Xian. The Lin clan could have actually owned the entire city of Yangzhou. Compared to their dream, this was a much larger achievement. However, because of one wrong decision, they had taken the wrong path. Lin Rui was looking at Lin Feng yet remained silent. He had expelled Lin Feng from the clan. Was he blind? Since you're not talking at all, I will help you. I will give you two choices. The first one is you attempt to get onto the fighting stage together and see the result. The second choice is you and me battle. If you win, I will immediately withdraw the army from the Lin clan. When Lin Feng saw that Lin Rui remained uncommunicative, Lin Feng offered a choice which astonished the crowd. They wouldn't have thought that Lin Feng would give such a choice to Lin Rui. Lin Rui had the opportunity to defeat Lin Feng and make him withdraw the army. Lin Rui was the respectable elder of the Lin clan. He was extremely strong and was only a step away from breaking into the Xianqi layer. Each of his attacks were extremely powerful. Besides, how old was Lin Feng? Even though he was a genius, how could he fight against Lin Rui? Lin Feng is so young and proud. He refuses to back down because he is a genius. He already controls an entire army, that's why he acts so confident, thought the members of the Lin clan. In their eyes, Lin Feng was a genius, but he would never be able to defeat Lin Rui. Lin Rui was about 80 years old, how could he let a young boy defeat him? Lin Feng, are you joking? Lin Rui hadn't even spoken yet and Lin Badao had already interrupted. They were facing an incredible army, so none of them actually dared to think about fighting. If Lin Feng wanted them to die, they would die. Lin Badao only hoped for one thing, that Lin Feng would withdraw the army. Lin Feng slowly turned around and looked at Lin Badao. Lin Feng smiled as if he was going to mock them again. I'm sorry Lin Badao, included in my terms is one detail, no matter if I win or if Lin Rui wins, you, Lin Badao, will die here. Lin Feng's voice wasn't loud, but Lin Badao was astonished. His heart felt ice cold. Cold chi was emerging from his body. No matter who won the battle, Lin Badao was going to die. Of course, I will give you an opportunity. If you manage to kill the respectable elder, I will forget about our past, said Lin Feng while laughing. Lin Badao was astonished. He immediately glanced at Lin Rui. Impossible. I, Lin Badao, am not that kind of person. Lin Rui is my elder, I would never attack him, said Lin Badao with a tone of morality and justice. His devotion to righteousness inspired reverence. All the people of the Lin clan were slightly nodding in agreement. Slash. At that moment an attack was cutting through the atmosphere. Lin Badao's hand was surrounded by a cold twinkling light. A dagger was rushing towards Lin Rui's back at full speed. It was a cold-blooded surprise attack aimed to kill Lin Rui. The crowd was stupefied. Lin Badao's words were still fresh in their minds, but he was already launching a sneak attack. He had proved his own hypocrisy. In order to save his own life, Lin Badao was ready to reveal his shameless nature. How dare you, shouted Lin Rui. At the moment when Lin Badao's dagger had almost reached Lin Rui released a piercingly cold ice energy as well as his spirit. In a flash, Lin Badao's dagger and hand were frozen solid. Die! The respectable elder's furious shout spread through the atmosphere. Lin Rui's palm reached Lin Badao's chest. Immediately after, he was covered with a layer of ice, as if he was about to be sealed within the ice. Old fool. Lin Feng was smiling coldly. Lin Badao had attacked, but Lin Rui retaliated at the exact same time. He had been protecting Lin Badao this whole time. On the path of cultivation, there were too many people who, for their lives, were ready to sacrifice the people around them. Lin Rui had lived for almost 80 years, how could he believe the words which just left Lin Badao's mouth? Lin Badao, I have always been good to you and you dare to try and attack me by surprise. Don't blame for being rude now, said Lin Rui with killing intent in his voice. The piercingly cold energy emerging from his body was becoming more and more intense. No! Father! Lin Rui, don't you dare! At that moment, two people shouted furiously. It was Lin Xian and her brother. They both threw themselves at Lin Rui. Screw off! Lin Rui raised his hand and released his ice energy. How could he still care about Lin Xian at that moment? All he cared about was his own life. Die, shouted Lin Rui evilly. His ice energy was condensed into all of his attacks. Lin Badao was shaking, his body twitched twice. In a flash, the condensed ice energy burst forth and he was frozen to death. Lin Badao, because he wanted to become the head of the Lin clan, had unscrupulously employed unethical methods and plotted against members of his own family. In the end, the result was tragic. "Father," cried the two voices. Lin Rui was expressionless. He slowly turned around, he looked brutally cold. Was the Lin clan really a family? How could they kill each other so easily and without mercy? Lin Badao wanted to kill Lin Rui, but Lin Rui killed him. All these people were now showing their true colors and how treacherous they really were. Lin Rui looked at Lin Feng and jumped onto the fighting stage. He then said to Lin Feng, "Lin Badao is dead. I killed him for you. Besides, Lin Feng, you are an outstanding genius. I admit that I was blind. Today, let's fight. If I lose, I will accept my death." Lin Rui's words were inspiring and filled with a lofty and righteous aura, but Lin Feng didn't seem to care at all. What an old fool. Saying such nice things to try and awake some compassion in Lin Feng's heart, he had lived for so many years and was adept at scheming. He had cold-bloodedly killed Lin Badao without the slightest bit of hesitation. "No need to say such flowery words, don't worry, if you win, I will withdraw my army, if you lose, it is not that you will accept death, you will beg for it." Lin Feng sounded calm. He then added, "All right, let's begin." "I'm attacking, be careful," said Lin Rui while nodding. His ice spirit was invading the atmosphere with a powerful energy. The coldness was piercing to the bones. He took a step forwards and ice chi rushed towards Lin Feng. Lin Feng shook his head. They were fighting, Lin Rui didn't have to be so polite to him. Lin Feng moved his right foot forward and raised his arm with a fierce sword energy. At the moment, when the sword energy was about to reach Lin Rui's body, Lin Feng slashed his hand down. A hero at dusk, under the setting sun, the brilliance was slowly fading. When Lin Rui saw Lin Feng's hand, he felt like he was seeing an illusion. He had the feeling that the sun was starting to set. Sword of the setting sun. Lin Feng had used his hand as the sword. His hand cut through the atmosphere, blood sprayed into the air and Lin Rui's arm was sent flying through the air. One strike was enough to remove one of Lin Rui's arms. Chapter 265, The Terrible Loss. When the crowd saw that arm flying in the air, they were astonished once again. That attack didn't diffuse resplendent light, they hadn't even seen a sword. Lin Feng's sword was his hand. His entire body was a sword. It was a sword without brightness and splendor. In a short time, Lin Feng surprisingly had become extremely strong. Even the respectable elder couldn't rival him anymore. He hadn't even been able to withstand a single attack. Lin Rui had the strength of the 9th Ling Qi layer, he just needed one more step to reach the Xian Qi layer. But what was Lin Feng's level? Lin Feng was only 17 years old and was young like many of the juniors of the Lin clan, but the people of the Lin clan always relied on their parents and on the clan. Lin Feng was absolutely different from the others because he was already extremely strong and already controlled an army. That was a huge difference and the young people of the Lin clan would be unable to catch up with him. That young man who had been expelled from the Lin clan was already above their entire clan and made them prostrate themselves before him. Ah! Lin Rui gave a horrible shriek. He raised his remaining arm and released all the ice chi that he could, not hesitating and putting everything into his attack. But Lin Feng moved again, he was quick and agile. He seemed moved in fusion with the earth, he looked mysterious. A light flashed, immediately, Lin Rui's hand slightly touched Lin Feng's shoulder and ice started to appear, but then Lin Feng slightly moved his hand and a sword light filled the atmosphere. Slash! Lin Feng's hand slashed like a meteor, blood sprayed and filled the air. Lin Rui's other arm had just been cut off. Lin Feng had cut it off as easily as the first arm. Lin Feng was much stronger than Lin Rui. Lin Feng dashed past Lin Rui and at that moment, he was behind Lin Rui's back, Lin Feng's hand had pierced his back and he looked calm and peaceful. Ah! A cry of agony spread in the air. Lin Rui had the impression that the world around him was vibrating. His body was violently shaking. Blood didn't stop flowing onto the ground, but Lin Rui's heart felt even more painful than his arms which had been cut off. If Lin Feng didn't kill him, he crippled his cultivation. Respectable elder, back in the past, you were very strong and controlled everything. You could do whatever you wished. You expelled my father and me from the clan, you chose a new clan head, you attacked and hurt my father. Now, I came back and I am stronger than you, therefore, I now control everything. I can now do as I wish. If I want to cut your arms off, I can, if I want to kill you, I can. Lin Feng's voice was coming from Lin Rui's back, these words were the harsh reality. Strength was the most important thing in that world. If one was strong, one had power over weaker people and could thus do as they wished. Lin Rui used to have the advantage, he had injured Lin Feng's father and had expelled him. Now, Lin Feng was stronger than him and had easily cut off his arms, who could do anything against that. If he wanted to cripple anyone's cultivation, he could. If he wanted to kill anyone, he could. Lin Rui's heart was bleeding. At that moment, his heart was filled with venom but his mouth was firmly closed. He didn't dare say anything to Lin Feng. Lin Feng was right, in that world, the strong could control everything. If Lin Rui wanted to stay alive, he had to keep his mouth shut, even if he hated Lin Feng. Becoming a cripple is still better than dying. Lin Rui was already old and cherished life, he didn't want to die. Lin Rui, today, I will have mercy on you and will not kill you. You are now half dead. I cut off your arms because of what you did in the past. Now you need to vanish from my sight. If, someday, you have the possibility of getting your revenge, come at me, said Lin Feng sounding cold and detached. No matter what his status was, in that world, all that mattered was strength. Lin Rui was shaking. He turned around and looked at Lin Feng. Immediately after, he started walking and slowly left. He looked lonely and desolate. That was the price he had to pay for having made such a grave mistake in the past. After Lin Rui left, Lin Feng gazed into the distance and then looked at the Great Elder and the Third Elder. He said, sounding cold and indifferent, Great Elder, Third Elder, you two can cripple your own cultivation. Don't make me do it personally, otherwise, there will be an extra fee of 2 arms. Lin Feng sounded calm and serene while the 2 elders were deathly pale. They should have expected it. Lin Feng was getting his revenge for all the bad things they had all done to him in the past. Back then, they kept humiliating Lin Feng, forced him to leave. These 2 people had been Lin Badao's accomplices. That's why Lin Feng wanted to make them cripple their own cultivation. When the Great Elder saw the armless silhouette in the distance, he suddenly burst into an insane laughter. Immediately after, he moved his hand and bombarded his own cultivation. He groaned and blood gushed from his mouth. He had crippled his own cultivation. The Third Elder was shaking. He was slowly and hesitantly moving his hand, but not attacking. Third Elder, if you don't want to die, cripple your own cultivation immediately, said the Great Elder sounding tense. The Third Elder was shaking even more. He glanced at the Great Elder and crippled his own cultivation as well. The head of the clan, Lin Badao, had died, the third uncle Lin Haoran had died, the 9th Elder had died, the respectable Elder no longer had arms, the Great Elder and Third Elder had crippled their own cultivation. Lin Feng had come back and spread terror amongst people's hearts. Lin Feng was standing on the fighting stage and looking at the crowd, sounding indifferent. He said, all others, I will not touch you, even if you hate me, that is, of course, providing that you behave properly. Of course, if you want to get your revenge, you can also come and find me. The best thing is for you to think carefully about your future though. When Lin Feng finished talking, he turned around and moved down from the stage. He raised his hand. In a flash, the myriad of troops climbed onto their horses. They were a perfectly trained elite army. Lin Feng and the troops were making history together. Lin Feng also jumped onto his horse that was brought. He looked domineering. Let's go, said Lin Feng sounding indifferent. At that moment, a voice spread in the atmosphere. Wait, wait. When Lin Feng heard that voice, he stopped but didn't turn around. He just waited for the other person to talk. Lin Feng, will you consider coming back to the Lin clan, said a hopeless-sounding voice which made everybody else shiver and look towards Lin Feng. Indeed, would Lin Feng ever return to the Lin clan? If Lin Feng accepted to go back to the Lin clan, not only would it give him nothing but it would give incredible prestige to the Lin clan. It would make them become one of the most prestigious clans in the entire region. That hopeless voice was resonating in people's hearts but nobody dared speak. The same person spoke again. If you are willing to come back to the Lin clan, we can make all those who opposed you in the past leave the clan, including Lin Xian. The person spoke again because they had seen that Lin Feng remained silent. The whole crowd was quiet. Indeed, if Lin Feng accepted, they could forget about Lin Xian, just like they did to Lin Feng in the past. Back in the past, they had chosen the proud and arrogant Lin Xian, who couldn't rival with Lin Feng any longer. Lin Xian looked at Lin Badao's corpse and felt extremely sad. She used to be the pride of the Lin clan. Even in Yangzhou City, many people respected her, but because of Lin Feng, her glory had been destroyed. Lin Feng was much more prestigious than her. Lin Xian could still vaguely remember when she had gone to the Yunhai sect and humiliated Lin Feng while looking down on him, but all of this was already the past. Back in the past, when I was expelled from the Lin clan, nobody said a word. Now that you see that I am strong and have a high status and you want me to come back to the clan, is that even possible? There are some things which cannot be taken back. Lin Feng was on his horse, he didn't even turn around to look at them. Immediately after, he left at full speed with his horse emitting whistling sounds through the atmosphere. The myriad of Qi Xia troops seemed to be flying. The ground was shaking along with people's hearts. The Lin clan were all looking at the leaving silhouettes. Their hearts were filled with mixed feelings. Some things could not be taken back. Lin Feng was right. When everybody kept humiliating him, who had said a word? Who spared even a single word to help Lin Feng? When the Lin clan wanted to kill Lin Feng, who had said anything to try and save him? These days, Lin Feng was extremely strong and was the officer of a huge army, only now they wanted him to go back to the clan. Was that even possible? They could never get back what they threw away and discarded, never. Chapter 266, Lin Feng is dangerous. At the end of the year, Yangzhou City was always extraordinarily lively. On the road, people were standing around in small groups. At that moment, in Yangzhou City, there was a majestic army composed of Qi Xia armored cavalry. They were making an inspection tour of the city. All of them looked domineering and imposing. Everybody was looking at them with a deep respect. The Qi Xia troops are extremely majestic. It is said that they are all elite soldiers. Now, they are in our city. On the road, the Qi Xia horses were trotting. The crowd was looking at these majestic horses. Some people were talking about them. That is an honor for our city. Now that the Qi Xia troops are here, we are incredibly prestigious within the entire region. Who will dare provoke us? You're right, last year, I had the chance to see the Qi Xia officer with my own eyes. He was only about 16 years old, but at the annual cultivation meeting of Yangzhou City, he had displayed incredible abilities. He was much stronger than Na Lan Fang or Lin Xian. They couldn't even withstand a single attack. At that moment, I already knew that the officer would become an incredible person. I just wouldn't have thought that it would happen in such a short period of time, said a man with a long mustache. He sounded so proud that it made people around him feel exasperated. 1 year before, there had been a young man at the cultivation meeting of Yangzhou City, but the members belonging to the biggest clans had attacked him and forced him to escape. 1 year later, that young man had become more mature, more determined, and extremely strong. He looked extremely majestic and imposing on his horse, controlling several thousand soldiers. He had returned to Yangzhou City as a glorious young hero. Since that moment, the 4 big clans of Yangzhou City had sunk to new lows. There was only Lin Feng controlling a military government. He had replaced the former government and shut out the clans from city affairs. But the people were excited and delighted by all of this. They had heard that Lin Feng wanted to build a Qixie castle and take measures to make Yangzhou City grow more influential. Yangzhou people were, of course, happy because they would be able to enjoy more benefits, including benefits for their practice of cultivation. At that moment, the government infrastructure was in constant change. The Qixie troops were busy enlarging the government palace. Within 1 day, all the walls surrounding the government had been destroyed. At that moment, Lin Feng was standing in an underground passage. While looking at the tunnel, Lin Feng looked pensive. The Qixie troops had just finished digging this passageway and it was pitch dark. Strong as they were, they had already done half of the work for him. Since Lin Feng had become the officer of such powerful soldiers, he, of course, used them to accomplish difficult tasks. His silhouette flickered and he disappeared down the passageway. After a short moment, he appeared in the middle of a room. In front of him was a huge table. Standing on the left and right of the table, there were 3 silhouettes. They looked pensive. These 3 people were the former middle, left and right officers, Ren Qingquang, Feng Yuhan and Lei Qingtian. They all used to have their own armies, but now, they were assisting Lin Feng and staying by his side. Lin Feng, look, we are here we can dig a river. Then, we can build towers on these 8 strategic locations. The government building is in a valley, so even people of the Xianxi layer come, in normal circumstances, we should be able to defeat them. Feng Yuhan sounded full of confidence. The Qixie troops were elite soldiers. Ren Qingquang was an expert at planning and defensive military strategy. The left officer, Feng Yuhan, was an expert at organizing military formations and offensive strategies. The right officer, Lei Qingtian, was an expert at organizing a geographical strategy and modifying terrain to protect the troops. They were all extremely skilled officers. Obviously, controlling such a huge army required them to divide the tasks. All these officers had their own tasks to fulfill. Lin Feng was carefully observing the table. He slightly nodded and said, Uncle Feng, you can reorganize the city as you wish. I just need you to help me build a secret underground city. Constructing an underground city will not be difficult now because the troops are extremely happy to follow your orders. However, the imperial city will not help us again. We have to rely on ourselves. If we spend too much time and money on all of this, it might become complicated. Besides, the troops could also lose their enthusiasm over time. Lin Feng slightly nodded. That was indeed a problem. Currently, the troops were in a perfect state of mind. Even if they accepted to help and invest from their own pocket, that wasn't a solution for the long term. An army was extremely strong but also required a lot of things. They required pills, purity stones, weapons, armor and battle horses. Besides, constructing all these things in Yangzhou City also required a colossal amount of resources. I understand. I will find a solution for all of this, said Lin Feng. Immediately after, he looked at Ren Qingquang and Lei Qingtian and said, Uncle Ren, you can take care of the weapons and constructions. Uncle Lei, you can take care of the guards and protection of the city. You are all working very hard, thank you. All right. Don't worry, I can do it. The 2 officers replied to Lin Feng. These days, Yangzhou City was Lin Feng's fief. He could not let the army suffer. He had to make his army become even stronger and expand his power. He still remembered the memories from the strong cultivator. They were all extremely valuable and precious memories with vast knowledge. Sooner or later, the city of Yangzhou would rise and draw the attention of the entire country. Lin Feng didn't intend to go back to the imperial city in the following months. He wanted to concentrate his attention on Yangzhou City. Uncles, you are all working very hard, thank you. Lin Feng looked grateful. These 3 people used to be officers and these days, they were following and assisting him. That would always remain engraved in Lin Feng's memory. Lin Feng, the 3 of us, as well as Zhou Qixie followed the general even at the cost of our lives. Now, the general's heart had died with Zhou Qixie. The 3 of us, in short, are willing to help you because the general trusts you with the future of the army, and because of that we trust you too. Ren Qingquang was looking at Lin Feng and his eyes were filled with hope. Lin Feng was extremely frivolous and had dared to kill Duan Tianlang's son, Duan Han, for Lu Xanlan. If Lin Feng didn't become extremely powerful, the 3 of them would give up because it was clear to them that these days, Lu Xanlan's heart was no longer the same, he didn't have the same ambition as he used to. If they were on Lu Xanlan's side, there wouldn't be much to do. Therefore, they had listened to Lu Xanlan and had decided to follow Lin Feng and help him achieve his ambitions. Only they could understand the glory of such things. Lin Feng understood that as well, which is why he had to be extremely ambitious. In a clean and tidy room, all the furniture was brand new. Lin Feng pushed the door and entered that room. There was a gorgeous silhouette sluggishly lying on a bed and looking at the ceiling. It was impossible to say what that person was thinking. Meng Cheng looked at Lin Feng and then turned around again. She looked as cold as before. Lin Feng smiled wryly. How come he hadn't managed to make her heart melt yet? But it was also very clear to Lin Feng that these days, he could freely enter Meng Cheng's room. That was already a good thing. If it had been someone else, that person would probably have been frozen stiff by Meng Cheng. Only Lin Feng could go into her room. Lin Feng walked towards Meng Cheng and spoke in a low voice. What are you thinking about? Meng Cheng slightly shook her head and said, nothing. Lin Feng got closer to the bed and slowly sat down. Meng Cheng moved her legs away, allowing Lin Feng to sit down. Are you thinking about me? Asked Lin Feng with a smile on his face. But Meng Cheng was just calmly looking at him coldly, which made Lin Feng's face become rigid. That girl was way too difficult to understand. Meng Cheng, still lying on the bed, looked at the ceiling again, ignoring Lin Feng. Lin Feng slightly moved closer to Meng Cheng, which made her move back a bit more. She was staring at Lin Feng approaching. She then glared as if she was looking at a dangerous enemy. Lin Feng scratched his head and kept approaching Meng Cheng, which finally made her react. She was blinking nervously. Can I hug you? Said Lin Feng while looking at that breathtaking beauty. Only if you do it without speaking, said Meng Cheng. Lin Feng had anticipated that reply and was already hugging her, pushing her head onto his chest. Chapter 267, The Nine Palaces. Meng Cheng and Lin Feng were locked in an embrace. Meng Cheng was shaking from head to toe. She had no strength anymore. She couldn't do anything but follow Lin Feng's movements and lean on his chest. Meng Cheng raised her head and looked at Lin Feng. Their faces were very close. At that moment, something very rare happened. Emotion flashed through Meng Cheng's eyes and she looked shy. Her pure and holy face suddenly turned red, which made Lin Feng's heartbeat accelerate. Let me go. Surprisingly, Meng Cheng was struggling to move away from Lin Feng, but he was holding her too tightly. Very quickly, she stopped struggling and lowered her head, not daring to look at Lin Feng's scorching hot eyes. Lin Feng smiled. That girl was cold, but she still listened to Lin Feng. I like holding you, said Lin Feng while smiling. Meng Cheng slowly turned her head around and raised it while looking at Lin Feng. Her eyes betrayed her at that moment. Meng Cheng then calmed down and laid against Lin Feng's chest again. Lin Feng was hugging her and she was feeling calm and at ease. It was such a perfect moment. That short moment seemed like an eternity. Lin Feng was tightly holding on to that absolutely gorgeous young woman. His heart was beating quickly. She was enchanting. However, Lin Feng was not thinking of the act between a man and a woman, but was still feeling a strange warmth rising within him. Meng Cheng, look at me. After being silent for a while, Lin Feng spoke. Meng Cheng, who was lying on Lin Feng's chest, raised her head and looked at Lin Feng. She looked a bit surprised. You truly are beautiful, said Lin Feng while smiling. Meng Cheng felt unfamiliar emotions. She looked shy again. Every girl liked it when the person they loved thought they were beautiful. Meng Cheng, even though she was an unusual girl, was, after all, still a girl. She also understood the feelings of love and hatred. Once a girl fell in love with a boy, she wouldn't be that different from the others. Everyone became a child when in love. Lin Feng was lowering his head, getting nearer and nearer to Meng Cheng's face. Meng Cheng looked extremely embarrassed. She was shaking and her heart was pounding. She wanted to escape, but at the same time, she didn't want to go anywhere. Finally, Lin Feng pressed his lips against her lips. Meng Cheng was shaking. It was like an electric shock. Her eyes were wide open, her face was rigid. She didn't know what was happening, but it felt right. They didn't kiss for a very long time before Lin Feng moved his head back and looked at Meng Cheng. He smiled at her in a very sweet way. Meng Cheng looked at Lin Feng and saw that he was smiling. She looked extremely shy. She didn't dare look at him. She had the feeling that she was drowning in emotion. She was extremely shy and nervous. Actually, Lin Feng was nervous too. It was the first time that he had fallen in love with someone. It was also the first time that he embraced and kissed a girl. How could he not be nervous? Even though he could use his sword and remain calm in the middle of a bloodbath, when it came to girls, Lin Feng was very nervous. Maybe he lacked experience. Meng Cheng, have a good rest, said Lin Feng while standing up and looking at Meng Cheng. Immediately after, he turned around and started to leave. After Lin Feng left, Meng Cheng raised her head. She was excited and embarrassed at the same time. She sat down and put her hands on her knees. She looked pensive. She wanted to remember a smile. In her thoughts slowly appeared a smile, a warm smile. 3 months later, many things had been constructed in Yangzhou City. There were vast new buildings that had been constructed. Besides, there were also 8 huge towers, which were a few hundred meters high, and when looking up at them, they seemed to reach the stars. Besides, the old government building had become the headquarters for the new government. It was much more extravagant than in the past. Besides, it was very lively inside and there were things constantly going on. However, the people didn't know what was happening there apart from the fact that the government was undergoing reconstruction. In an underground place, Lin Feng was sitting cross-legged, motionless. At that moment, Lin Feng had the feeling that he had reached an extremely high level of earth fusion. In his mind, there was a dark world in which a myriad of bright lights were flashing. These lights were all in different corners, seeming unorganized. These disorderly and unsystematic lights seemed like they had been put there randomly, but actually, when looking at them from the right angle, one could notice a special form. It looked mysterious. Many surplus souls were moving towards these lights and finally, a strength attracted them. A light appeared between two lights and all of the lights seemed to be fused into a shape. The dark atmosphere slowly became brighter. Immediately after the lights appeared, the lights were getting more and more intense in that dark atmosphere. They were gathering together, making the dark atmosphere extremely bright and even dazzling. The lights were also moving faster and faster. The lights were slowly adopting a peculiar shape, the shape of 9 palaces. In Shuiyu, cultivators of the Qian layer were considered as extremely strong cultivators because they could control and condense qi from the world to transform it into pure qi that could be used, thus benefiting from its strength. Each thread of pure qi contained a colossal amount of strength. At the same time, cultivators of the Qian layer could also gradually learn how to control the strength of their soul, which helped them concoct pills and increase the power of pills, weapons, and their attacks. Besides, before breaking through to the Qian layer, even though some people could use various strong methods, they still couldn't benefit from the strength of the soul, which strongly limited their abilities. Every cultivator of the Qian layer had a few basic cultivation techniques. At least, they all practiced until they could perfectly control pure qi. There wasn't a single one of them who couldn't control it. However, pure qi control could be stronger or weaker, there could be large quantities and small quantities controlled by the cultivator. Weak pure qi control only enabled the cultivator to condense pure qi a little bit quicker. However, the strength was limited. Strong pure qi control enabled cultivators to unceasingly use stronger pure qi, but it required more time. At that moment, Lin Feng was practicing his pure qi condensation. Even though Lin Feng had a lot of purity stones, it wasn't enough to supply his army. Therefore, the thing was to provide his army with the best cultivation practices, in order to save the use of purity stones. At the moment, he was still in fusion with the earth. Lin Feng's eyes were closed. His consciousness was in a world filled with darkness and bright lights. His mouth moved, he then immediately said, "Condense." At that moment, Lin Feng was insanely shaking, he groaned, his eyes slightly opened. Lin Feng coughed and raised his head. He looked around him. There were dazzling lights surrounding him and they were slowly condensing. When the last light was fused with the others, an incredibly dazzling aura appeared. There were 9 palaces and they started absorbing the pure qi of heaven and earth. Lin Feng couldn't bear the pain, but the shapes that appeared made him smile. The 9 small palaces of qi condensation, what a powerful technique. Lin Feng could feel the pure qi from the earth starting to gravitate towards him. The cultivation towers of the Celestial Academy provided incredible amounts of pure qi. The pure qi would be drawn towards the tower and would fill the rooms for cultivation practice. Lin Feng was now also able to condense pure qi. These 9 small palaces were already extremely powerful. The knowledge that the cultivator of the Zun Qi layer transmitted to me is, as expected, extraordinary. I have now been learning surplus souls and can make 100 surplus souls appear. My soul has also become much stronger, coupled with earth fusion. If I didn't have all these things, I wouldn't be able to condense qi to such a degree, whispered Lin Feng. His extremely strong soul was giving him the chance to become much stronger. The surplus souls technique as well as the earth fusion had been indispensable to him when it came to condensing pure qi. A moment before, people in the government building were stupefied. Above them in the sky there was a pattern that appeared, it looked like 9 palaces, but then, in the blink of an eye, they disappeared again. They had just sensed the pure qi as if all the qi of heaven and earth was moving towards them. At the same time, around the government building, many people were stupefied as well. They had also sensed the pure qi emerging from the earth, as if there had been a strange strength absorbing the powerful pure qi of heaven and earth. Only an extremely strong cultivator of the Qian layer could have managed to condense pure qi like that. After the people sensed the qi, they all looked in the same direction, the government building. Chapter 268, Celestial River. 2 months after, the government buildings looked completely different, it was like a new small city was built within the city of Yangzhou. The government area was much bigger than before. There were palaces, pavilions, and even a castle within the area. It looked majestic and it gave the feeling of power and military might. Besides, it seemed like it was still not complete. They hadn't constructed any ramparts yet as they were still expanding outwards and reconstructing. Apart from the Qixia troops who were constructing things, within the government area, there were other people as well. There were some people who had been hired to help and some others who were working as volunteers. At that moment in Yangzhou City, everybody wanted to go to the government area and were happy to do some manual labor because there was an incredible quantity of pure qi that seemed to be gathered there, which meant that it was an extremely beneficial place for cultivators. On the path of cultivation, the pure qi of heaven and earth could alter bones, flesh, blood, and improve cultivation. A cultivator would have never refused an environment rich in pure qi. Besides, in Yangzhou City, there weren't many people who had purity stones. Those who practiced cultivation using purity stones lived a life of luxury. Ordinary people could only absorb the pure qi of heaven and earth which was present in the atmosphere. However, these days, the government area was filled with pure qi in which the manual workers could bathe all day while working. Then, in the evening, they could practice cultivation in the outer area. The government area was already divided into an inner government area and an outer area. The inner government area could be accessed only by Qixia soldiers, the core members of the government. It was strictly prohibited for other people to enter it. If someone tried to enter it, they would be executed on the spot. At that moment, some silhouettes were passing through the door of which led from the inner government area to the outer area. They were Qixia troops galloping at full speed while creating a hurricane of dust. In a flash, they had left. Officer Lin Feng is such a heroic and majestic young man. Indeed, as he's as young as the rumors said. It's such an honor to be able to see Officer Lin Feng. Outside, there was a lively crowd who saw the Xia horses pass by. Their eyes were alight with excitement. These days, in Yangzhou City, Lin Feng had become a legend, a myth. His name was on everybody's lips. Seeing Lin Feng was, for them, an honor. Besides, even though Lin Feng was the Marquis of Yangzhou, they liked to call him Officer Lin Feng even more. The term officer was majestic and imposing, it perfectly corresponded with Lin Feng's status. By the way, have you ever seen the officer's girlfriend? She wears a fine veil just like a celestial being. Of course I have seen her. Even though we can't see her face, I can guess that she's an exceptional woman. The officer couldn't be with a girl who doesn't match him. They definitely suit each other. People were making various comments. At that moment, Lin Feng's horse had already rushed past. Meng Qing, everybody is saying that you are my girlfriend, said Lin Feng on his horse while glancing at Meng Qing who was galloping next to him. Lin Feng was smiling, he had clearly heard what these people were saying. Meng Qing glanced at Lin Feng but didn't say anything. But Lin Feng kept smiling wholeheartedly. In the past, Meng Qing used to be ice-cold and expressionless. These days, she was at least looking at him, which could be considered as an improvement. A group of Xia horses were leaving the government area, and then immediately they left Yangzhou City as well, galloping towards an ancient road. Celestial River was an ancient city with a history which dated back to millions of years. That majestic ancient city, even though it had gone through the challenges of time, still had the atmosphere of an ancient city. At the entrance gate, there was an incredibly artistic ferocious beast carved into the stone. It was a legendary wild beast, a phoenix. There was fire burning on the back of its wings. That beast was filled with ancient qi. Celestial River also had another nickname, Phoenix City. Celestial River was situated in the middle of the Shuiyu country. It was surrounded by what seemed to be an endless desert. When one stretched one's eyes as far as one could see, there was nothing but yellow sand. However, that geographical position didn't affect the development of the city, which was a huge trading center, one of the biggest in Shuiyu. The city was filled with flourishing businesses of all sorts, including fields of real estate and different trade industries. Local people were very rare. Since the beginning of time, Celestial River had been a city in which people came to carry out transactions and find the objects they desired the most. With time, the local population had almost gone extinct and most of the population was businesses. There was a saying in Shuiyu which said, if you need something, you will find it at Celestial River. In Celestial River, the average quantity of extremely strong cultivators was also higher than the national average to the extent that it had some of the strongest cultivators of the country. Those who didn't have a high cultivation were embarrassed to go there, considering they would encounter strong cultivators on frequent occasions. On the street, when a person saw another unknown cultivator, maybe he was a cultivator of the Ling Qi layer or even of the Xian Qi layer. That contributed to making the city even more appealing. At that moment, outside of Celestial River, a group of Xia horses were galloping on the yellow sand surrounded by a cloud of yellow dust. They were galloping towards Celestial River. That group was composed of only 3 people, Lin Feng and 2 others. Lin Feng and Meng Qing were galloping at the front and Ba Dao, who was wearing a mask and following them. These days, Ba Dao seemed introverted. He was also able to better control his aggressiveness and his temper. Meng Qing, Celestial River carries out very liberal politics, you can enter as you wish. However, inside, it can be perilous, people are cruel and merciless. A person should not hide their presence or they may be attacked by others, said Lin Feng to Meng Qing. Meng Qing's lifestyle used to be completely different, so Lin Feng was doing his best to tell her as many things as possible. Alright, said Meng Qing while slightly nodding. Lin Feng turned his head and looked in front of him. Coming from the left, 2 armored horses were rushing into the city before them. 2 cultivators of the 9th Ling Qi layer, whispered Ba Dao behind Lin Feng and Meng Qing. Lin Feng was stupefied. As expected, the rumors about Celestial River were true. At that moment, they were rushing through the yellow desert, then arrived on a road made of bluestone leading towards the city gate. But at the same time, 2 silhouettes descended from the air landing under the Phoenix City gate blocking their way. Lin Feng, Ba Dao and Meng Qing reined in their horses which started trotting and eventually came to a stop. They looked at the 2 silhouettes who were in front of them. They were 2 men, who were about 30 years old. One of them looked ice-cold and dark while the other had an evil smile on his face. These people were definitely not here with good intentions. What do you want? Said Lin Feng sounding cold. Every person who wishes to enter the city must pay a fee of 10 purity stones of medium quality, which means that you 3 have to pay 30 purity stones in total. 300 purity stones of lower quality would be fine as well, said the one who was smiling evilly. Lin Feng frowned. Celestial River is the city of freedom, you can enter and leave as you wish. Since when do you have to pay a tax? Besides, even if there was a tax, why would I give it to you? Said Lin Feng sounding detached. Because I say so. So no need to speak nonsense, said the evil-looking person furiously when he heard Lin Feng. Lin Feng's facial expression turned ice-cold. A moment ago, 2 people had entered the city and these 2 didn't stop them. When they arrived, these people came down. They most probably thought that they were weak. As expected, Celestial River was a heaven for strong cultivators and hell for weak ones. What if I don't give you anything? Said Lin Feng sounding indifferent. If you don't give me anything, said the man with the evil smile. Even though Celestial River was full of extremely strong cultivators, not all of them were strong. Lin Feng was very young and had high natural talent, but how strong could young cultivators be when compared to their elders? Young people like Lin Feng were the favorite targets of these two men. They were always stationed above the city gate and stealing purity stones. It was extremely easy to get purity stones because people who came to Celestial River often had all their money to purchase goods. If you don't give it, you will die, said the one with the evil smile on his face. He released some deadly chi. Sacrificing 3 lives for 30 purity stones of medium quality, are you sure that it is the right decision? Asked the one with the evil smile. His chi was getting denser and denser. No need, I'm sure, said Lin Feng while turning around and moving his horse forwards. These two men smiled coldly and said, do you think that you can just leave like that? But at the moment they finished talking, Ba Dao rushed over to them releasing a terrifying chi. At that moment, Ba Dao's chi turned into blade energy, it was extremely sharp and ice cold. At that moment, these two men's facial expressions changed drastically. His blade chi was extremely powerful, there was also blade force. Besides, that chi had the force was at the 7th chi layer, which was the same level as theirs. Die, said Ba Dao. In these two men's eyes, an expression of hopelessness appeared. A bright, resplendent and dazzling light cut through the air and removed their heads from their body. Ba Dao remained expressionless. Let's go, said Lin Feng, and the 3 people entered Celestial River. At that moment, in the distance, there were a few silhouettes, 2 boys and 1 girl. When they saw these 2 heads fly away, they took a deep breath. What a strong and powerful blade, said the girl in a low voice. These 3 people had arrived in Celestial River earlier, but because of these 2 people, they hadn't dared enter the city and were trying to hide in the distance. Ba Dao had immediately killed the 2 men. Who's the person who's wearing the mask? He should already be a master of blade force. I heard that the second core disciple of the Haiyu clan, the Blade Master, was also coming to Celestial River. Could that be him? Whispered the girl. The 2 boys on her side said, if he is the Blade Master, who are the 2 others? The young girl shook her head indicating that she didn't know either. Immediately after, these 3 people entered Celestial River. Chapter 269, The Blade Master. The big power closest to Celestial River was the Haiyu sect. The second was the Ice and Snow Mountain Village, therefore, in Celestial River, there were always plenty of disciples of the Haiyu sect and of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village. In Celestial River, they could find all the things they needed. They obviously enjoyed spending time there. A year before, the Holy Courtyard of Shueyu had been inaugurated, the Yin Hai sect had been annihilated, and at the same time, the Haiyu sect and the Ice and Snow Mountain Village had to give up many of their outstanding disciples to send them to study at the Holy Courtyard of Shueyu. In a year, the biggest sects of the country had completely shaken. For example, now, the best core disciple of the Haiyu sect was Zhang Shan and the second was Leng Yu aka the Blade Master. Amongst the Ice and Snow Mountain Village, Bing Yuan was one of the best talents. All of them were illustrious disciples, they were rising stars. Amongst all of them, the Blade Master was particularly amazing. He was even more monstrous than Zhang Shan. Leng Yu's blade was piercingly cold, the cold pierced to the bones like needles. Leng Yu rarely needed a second blade strike in his battles, one was enough to kill his opponents. Very often, he didn't even need to take out his blade to kill his opponents. The Blade Master's blade had reached perfection. It was said that, when he had the power of the 3rd Ling Chi layer, he had understood how to control blade force, then when he had the strength of the 6th Ling Chi layer, he had learned how to use energy attacks in these days, he was extremely strong and had broken through to the 8th Ling Chi layer. However, with his energy attacks, he was already able to defeat cultivators of the 9th Ling Chi layer. People who dared to fight against him were rare. Leng Yu's blade didn't appear randomly, if he took his blade out, it meant he was going to kill. Therefore, in a short time, within the last 6 months, he had gained the nickname, the Blade Master. Everybody knew the 8 high officials of Shueyu, many people thought that, in the future, the Blade Master could become one of them. On the central road of Celestial River, there was the Celestial Mountain Restaurant. Many people were having a break there and drinking some alcohol. At that moment, a silhouette stepped onto the wooden floor of the restaurant. When the people in the restaurant saw that silhouette, everybody went quiet. There is some blade energy. That blade energy is so cold. The crowd was stupefied. Everybody was staring at the person who had just entered the restaurant. That person looked like an ordinary young man. That young man didn't look like a noble cultivator. He didn't seem normal either. The only noticeable thing was that he was carrying was a blade on his back. It was an ancient one, it was even partly rusted. People were trying to guess how old that blade really was. Everybody was staring at that common and ordinary young man and remained silent. It was because he was releasing an extremely strong and powerful blade chi which seemed like it could explode at any moment and kill people. When that young man looked at the crowd, they had the impression that his eyes were like blades. The young man came in and indifferently glanced at the crowd. Everybody could feel the sharpness of his blade. Everybody was avoiding looking into his eyes, they didn't dare. But at that moment, the young man stopped. His blade-like eyes started looking at someone. That person was wearing a bronze mask and was releasing an incredibly brutal blade chi. That person was like him, a blade cultivator. But that person's blade was a brutal blade, his was a sharp blade. The young man smiled as he found the situation amusing and then stopped looking at him, went away and chose a place to sit. Because of him, the atmosphere in the restaurant had become quite oppressive. Ba Dao, how strong is he? Asked Lin Feng to Ba Dao in a low voice. They were sitting at a table on the second floor and were next to the banister. Very strong, I cannot defeat him. My strength and blade chi is not as strong as his, replied Ba Dao and then continued. He has broken through to the 8th Ling Chi layer. Oh, said Lin Feng while nodding. He had, of course, noticed that that young man was stronger than Ba Dao. Considering the blade energy that he released and in view of the fact that he had broken through to the 8th Ling Chi layer, he could probably already use her energy attacks and was at the point of condensing pure chi. Everybody could sense his strong blade energy. He wasn't releasing as much blade energy as he could though. He was actually very relaxed yet was releasing such a powerful blade energy as if he couldn't control it. It was not under his control because he had not mastered how to successfully condense his pure chi. Small amounts of the pure chi he was attempting to condense would be released along with each heartbeat. Coupled with the fact that he had the strength of the 8th Ling Chi layer, he could easily kill people of the 9th Ling Chi layer. Besides, people who were as strong as him, yet as young as him, were extremely rare. But he is too arrogant. He cannot rival you, said Ba Dao, which made Lin Feng smile. Shamelessly boasting, joked someone at the same time. That voice came from the table beside Lin Feng and his friends. At that table there was 4 people, 2 boys and 2 girls. The one who had said these words was a young girl. She was looking at Lin Feng and Ba Dao. She then said, sounding ice cold, you're really shamelessly boasting. You really are ridiculous. Lun Yu is my fellow disciple, from the Haiyu sect. He's extremely strong and has amazing natural talent. His nickname is the Blade Master. In the future, he will be the same as Chu Zhanpeng, the high official of our sect. He will become one of the 8 high officials. Who do you think you are? These 4 people were acting extremely arrogant, they really thought they were above everyone else. Besides, they were disciples of the Haiyu sect, which is why they were proud of the Blade Master in Chu Zhanpeng. The Blade Master? What an arrogant name, replied Ba Dao. He immediately added, but I've never heard of him before. The name was as sharp as a blade. Blade Master was indeed an arrogant nickname. Kacha, a cutting sound emerged in the atmosphere. The banister next to Lin Feng's table was broken. The place where it had been cut was neat and clean, as if it had been cut with an extremely sharp blade. Lin Feng turned around and looked at the first floor over the banister. He saw that Blade Master was sitting at his table and drinking some alcohol. At that moment, the Blade Master put his glass down onto his table and said while sounding indifferent. Next time that you open your mouth, be a little bit more respectful. He sounded calm and didn't try to hide his arrogance. He definitely deserves his nickname, he's extremely powerful. I didn't even seen him take his blade out, thought some people. Some young girls were looking at him with sparkling eyes. If only they could marry such a young man, that would be wonderful. Ba Dao stood up, some brutal chi was emerging from his body. Sit down, said Lin Feng sounding indifferent. Ba Dao was surprised. He immediately sat down again, yet still released some cold chi. Drink some alcohol, said Lin Feng calmly. Ba Dao grabbed his glass, had a sip and then his glass broke between his fingers. Ba Dao was a slave but had been given to the arena because he was too disobedient. He had ended up with Lin Feng who had given him freedom, but Ba Dao was still aggressive and had a strong personality. That guy is overestimating his own abilities, joked the Blade Master. Ba Dao was getting angry but Lin Feng and Meng Qing were very calm. These words weren't affecting them at all, as if they hadn't even heard them. How you sect, the Blade Master, thought Lin Feng. He slightly smiled, it had been almost half a year since he had been out of the spotlight yet it seemed like it had been 10 years, many things had changed. For a few months, Lin Feng had stayed in the government practicing his surplus soul technique, increasing his chi condensation method and studying his memories granted to him regarding pills and weapons. However, Lin Feng had the feeling that his abilities still weren't high enough. There were too many things which he wanted to improve. Lin Feng didn't want to owe anything to Shuiyu, which was a tiny country. In the memories of the cultivator of the Zun Chi layer, there was one person that was almighty, by slightly waving his hand, he could make heaven and earth turn upside down. Reporting in from the translation cave to wish you all a Merry Christmas. Chapter 270, The Dream Pavilion. When the boys and girls, sitting at the table next to that of Lin Feng and his friends, saw that they remained silent, they sneered at them and stopped looking at them. Brother, do you know why Lun Yu came to Celestial River? Of course, he came to Celestial River because of a blade, replied a boy. Oh, smiled a young girl while looking at the others, and then said, Lun Yu's blade skills are already so high, are there still blades which can draw his attention? It probably must be an amazing blade. Moonbreaking blade, it's a spiritual weapon of highest quality, what do you say, said a young boy of the Haiyu sect while smiling. Everybody was captivated and surprised. As expected, the Blade Master had come for the moonbreaking blade. They had all heard that that blade was available in Celestial River at that time. Many people had come because of it. A spiritual weapon of highest quality, not many people can get it, right? If Lun Yu is here, who will dare try and get it? Unless they want to become Lun Yu's enemies as well as the enemy of the Haiyu sect. When the crowd heard these people talking, they all understood what they meant. They were boasting about Lun Yu so that nobody would dare to try and steal the blade. The crowd understood that they had to think carefully before trying. That girl of the Haiyu sect knew why Lun Yu had come, so it was obviously clear that she was saying these things on purpose. The people who were with her looked proud and arrogant as well. But in the crowd, nobody dared to contradict these people. The Haiyu sect had a certain influence in Celestial River. Besides, at that moment, the Blade Master was also present. A spiritual weapon of highest quality, thought Lin Feng. He obviously knew the classification of spiritual weapons. There were ordinary weapons and spiritual weapons. Spiritual weapons could cut through iron as if it were mud. They also gave a cultivator a certain superiority during battles, and besides, they were also divided into 3 categories: low, medium and high quality. At the Yunhai sect, Lin Feng had obtained spiritual weapons in the temple near the precipice of Jianggu. Most of them were low and medium quality spiritual weapons, but there were also a few high quality spiritual weapons. In Shuiyu, spiritual weapons and pills, no matter what quality, were all very scarce. Seeing spiritual weapons of high quality was an extremely rare thing. There were also better weapons than spiritual weapons, mystical weapons. In Shuiyu, there were very few of them. Cultivators of the Xin-Chi layer rarely used mystical weapons. Lin Feng had never seen any in his life. Ba Dao, that moonbreaking blade, do you want it or not? Asked Lin Feng to Ba Dao in a low voice. Ba Dao was stupefied. Ba Dao was a blade cultivator, he obviously loved blades, how could it not want it? I want it, said Ba Dao while nodding greedily. Ba Dao was like that, if he wanted to do something, he just did it. Alright, replied Lin Feng sounding indifferent while nodding. He didn't add anything else. After a short while, Lun Yu put his glass onto his table, stood up and left the restaurant. After that, someone else came in and took his table. He had just left and thus the strong blade energy had vanished. The atmosphere wasn't as oppressive anymore. Sister, let's go too. The Hayu sect disciples, who were at the table next to Lin Feng, also stood up and left. After they left, Lin Feng asked Ba Dao, are you going to go ask where to find your new blade? Ba Dao was surprised. He immediately stood up and walked to a table near them. He asked the people sitting there, where can we find the moonbreaking blade? The 2 people sitting at the table raised their head and looked at Ba Dao. They smiled coldly and said, you're also wondering where the moonbreaking blade is? Boom. He had just finished talking and he released an incredible quantity of blade energy which oppressed the people who were sitting at the table. It was extremely brutal. They were shaking and looked absolutely terrified. In the Dream Pavilion. Today, there will be an auction sales at the Dream Pavilion. That person was panic-stricken and gasping with astonishment. A moment ago, Ba Dao's blade energy was unceasingly flowing towards Lang Yu, so these 2 people hadn't realized how strong Ba Dao's blade force was. At that moment, all the energy which was emerging from Ba Dao's body had fallen onto them, which gave them the impression that they would be crushed to death. What a monstrously strong blade force. That man, who was wearing a bronze mask, had already mastered blade force. Lead the way, said Ba Dao. These people were surprised but obediently stood up. Fortunately, they had told Ba Dao the truth. If they had lied to him, he definitely would have killed them. Alright, the person nodded in fear and led him outside of the restaurant. Lin Feng and Meng Qing also stood up and followed. When the people in the restaurant saw Lin Feng and the others leave, the atmosphere became lively. Who were those people? What a strong blade energy. He is probably interested in the moonbreaking blade as well. Indeed, there was also that guy and that girl. They didn't seem like ordinary cultivators. Even though they were probably weaker than the blade master, they also said that they wanted the moonbreaking blade. It seems like there will be a great show soon. All sorts of comments were spreading amongst the crowd. There were even some people standing up and then leaving towards the Dream Pavilion. The rumors said that, on that day, apart from the moonbreaking blade, there were going to be 2 other treasures at the auction of the Dream Pavilion. The Dream Pavilion was one of the big marketplaces in Celestial River. It was a vast and broad place covering a huge area. Celestial River was a city which was millions of years old and treasures were more numerous than in the Imperial City. There were new treasures being sold each day. There were some precious things which could only be acquired at the marketplace, at an auction market or through trade. At that moment, Lin Feng and his friends entered the pavilion. It was very noisy inside. In the pavilion, there were all sorts of people, handsome young men who had an elegant carriage, delicate and beautiful young women, shabbily dressed old men and filthy beggars. Some people were there to sell things, while some others were looking for various things. Sir, a Xian skill of high quality, are you interested? At that moment, a middle-aged man walked next to Lin Feng and talked in a low voice. Lin Feng was surprised. He then smiled, shook his head and said, I don't need it, thank you. When that middle-aged man heard Lin Feng, he didn't insist and immediately left as if nothing had happened. What's wrong? Said Lin Feng perplexed while looking at a person near them. Sir, it must be your first time in Celestial River. Indeed, said Lin Feng while nodding. No wonder, said that person as if they had suddenly understood. He continued, Celestial River is the biggest marketplace in Shuiyu. Here, there are various methods of selling things. Goods that are on the ground are ordinary goods and inexpensive. Of course, there are exceptions as well. Some of the sellers are also extremely strong cultivators and are therefore not afraid of putting the items they sell on the ground. They don't mind, who would dare come and steal their things. The second way to sell things is to find people with whom you can exchange things. For example, that person a moment ago needed purity stones, which is why he was looking for someone in need of skills, who would be willing to give him purity stones in exchange. There is also a third way to sell things, and it is at the auction sales. You can auction your things in the Dream Pavilion and sell them in their auction. Why do people exchange things with other people and don't bring them to auction sales? Asked Lin Feng confused. The fees of Dream Pavilion were quite low and besides, they could sell things at a higher price. There are many reasons. One of them is that they only sell 10 items a day. If you want to give them things to sell, you need to give it to them 3 days in advance and then they select the objects that they want to sell. If your thing is rejected, they give it back to you. Many people are unwilling to go through that troublesome procedure. Besides, ordinary things cannot be sold at the auction. Then, there are some people who are paranoid and don't want to show what they have to everybody else, it makes them worried. If they bring things to the auction marketplace, they feel unsafe. Therefore, they prefer going and finding someone on their own, which comes down to finding a needle in a haystack. When Lin Feng heard these words, he nodded as a sign that he had understood. Indeed, there were all sorts of possibilities. There were people who were realistic and felt good only if they had the object they were selling on themselves, near them. Many people were realists. It seems like we'll have to stay at the Dream Pavilion for a few days, thought Lin Feng. That time, he had come prepared, he absolutely needed to get a few things. Look, it's Bing Yuan, the top disciple of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village. At that moment, a surprised voice spread in the air. Many people were looking in one direction. They saw a group of people being led by an ice-cold and fierce-looking man, Bing Yuan, who had joined the Ice and Snow Mountain Village after the high official Luo Shui left for the Imperial City.